We've all seen this by now. It's a teaser image about some future 1 to 35 sauropods from Haolonggood. They've already shown us how serious they are by hitting us with one of the largest ones, the Mamenchisaurus, and now they're following up with Mamenchisaurus. Mamenchisaurus is an icon with the Chinese. Even people who aren't interested in dinosaurs know about it. I would say it's almost the equivalent of Brontosaurus or Diplodocus in Western popular culture. And while I liked the PNSO Mamenchisaurus, it was such an anticlimax to be released in such a small size. The collecte was very good, but small as well. So, except for the old dinosaurs of China one, I never expected to get another large one until now, which is a phrase I keep using in relation to Haolonggood's offerings. Haolonggood's Mamenchisaurus comes in 3 colors, a plain brown, a green, and a blue. Now, Haolonggood doesn't make it easy, because each is so attractive it's hard to choose. Immediately, I knew I wanted the blue. It's so striking and unexpected, and the color just calls out to me. But this was really a lark, and I wanted another one. But would it be the green, a favorite color of mine in dinosaurs, or the same old brown? Surprisingly, I went with the brown. I know, it looks boring in comparison, but I've been brainwashed by PNSO into wanting a darker, plainer color for Mamenchisaurus. As much as I like colors, this palette just seems instinctively more natural. And really, given how special this dinosaur is to us, I wanted a realistic looking Mamenchisaurus. And as much as I love green in dinosaurs, there's something very familiar and derivative in this. For example, we've seen this in Dacentrurus and Uranosaurus. Now that said, I've seen another collectors, and let's just say that if you order the green, you have no complaints. So here's what I have, the plain brown and the blue. Now I've seen a few pictures that worried me because some of the patterning looked very starkly applied, but in person it's actually all nicely faded into the skin, and you'll see more of that as we go along. So nothing unnatural jumps out. Mamenchisaurus has a range of size estimates depending on the species, from at least 15 meters or 49 feet to 30 meters or 98.4 feet or even more. I estimate the true central length of this model at 69 centimeters or 27.2 inches. 1 to 35 scale puts the real length at 24.2 meters or 79.4 feet. The respectable EO fauna book gives 25 meters or 82 feet, so it's very close. That's 1 to 36. I'll talk more about scales in the science part of the video later. Now, the basic horizontal length is 62 centimeters or 2 feet, and the height is 27 centimeters or 10.6 inches. It weighs 935 grams or 2.1 pounds, which compared to the Haolonggood Alamosaurus's 2 kilograms or 4.4 pounds, well, that's 53% lighter, and because of the shape, a lot less cumbersome and much easier to review. And there's plenty to see. We'll start with the brown. Now first, the head. Now it's a bit tricky because of how fragmentary the skulls of sauropods generally are, but allowing for soft tissue over the narial area, this seems to take inspiration from the skull of Mamenchisaurus hertuanensis, or possibly Yangyi. There is of course a very prominent chin, though in some of the other proportions there are some differences, as you can see. And from the top, it seems to be too broad to be modeling, at least on the Yangyi skull. Surprisingly, there seems to be a bit of shrink wrapping in the nasal and orbital areas. Really, a star of the model is the high level of wonderful and exquisite detail. While you can see some of it in the face and the head, down this expansive canvas, You'll really see all that fine detail in the scales, the folds, and the vascularity. You'll notice that even though brown, there's an incredible subtlety in the paint application. Look at how much complexity is achieved even in the general dark and more boring colors that you associate with depictions of these huge animals. So I guess it's not just the color palette, but how it's used that makes a huge difference. The scale detail is already wonderful, but see how this dry brushing of this white almost a kind of silver, and it literally adds a highlight to each of these little beads of scales. And the subtle hints of the ventral musculature are happily not exaggerated in bulkiness, which is important for believability, as we'll see in the science part of the video. You see here how the creases and the skin folds increase going into the body. Just very pleasing. Now into the body proper. Again, the detail and the color. But also, if you see in the central dorsal area, almost a kind of white or silvery brown highlight. Now, still on the dorsal aspect, you'll see these scutes. Now, each one is a different shape and size and individually shaded. I like how they're not just simple one-color applications, and they still do a wonderful job of being inconspicuous. Now, some of these have a kind of almost a pearlescent look to it, and compared to my almond, I think you get the picture. On the side, you can appreciate especially the musculature. I can make out the deltoid, maybe the traps here, the lats, and even a hint of the obliquus. Subtle yet very clear. This is one muscular individual. Now here's one of my favorite angles to look at the detail from. Look at these folds, each of them riddled with scales. And then going into the shoulder, the texture changes. Now all this variety, even in a big animal like this, is fine and intricate. And it carries on the standard of excellence that we've seen in the Apatosaurus. Again, skin folds and scutes and scales galore. It's the same story all the way down the arm, the forearm, and then the hands. Here we have the traditional horseshoe and thumb claw. I'll say there's just an extremely grainy appearance, and exactly because of the more muted color scheme, it just looks so organic. And in the body, look at how much complexity is in this area. Plain is a misnomer. I really don't have the words to fully describe it. This kind of multiple layering gives me the same delight I had with that now famous GR Toys Haolonggood Carcharodontosaurus. It's going to look a lot better in hand, of course, but even here, I think you can see all the subtle shades going on. and here in the thigh, then down the leg, and finally the feet. Just the same kind of wonderful work that we saw in the arms. And then down the feet. Just like a real mosaic of beads. Beautiful, the way that even in this dark, you can pick out the details. And now the tail. Now notice this little kink at the base of the tail, accounting for the sacral angulation. Very nice. And going down, just more of that pleasing detail and color. And I mean look here. Now this is so faint that you'd hardly notice it. But here, these aren't just random white dry brushing, but creating a very faint kind of a reticulated pattern. I mean, this is really amazing. Just so happy with the detail in this. And then let's segue into the orange red to end in the tail cloud. And even here, I've got to take out my almond again to show you how small this is. You see small areas of complexity. No shortcuts. And finally, a look at the underside. And even here, with these dry brushings of white, I can imagine it being all cake mud that's dried up on the animal and is falling off. And here, all these folds and maybe some superficial vascularity. And being compressed in the pectoral area, as you'd expect. I think just little else needs to be said. Alright, so much for the brown version. Let's talk a bit about that immense neck. Now, Moratal 2023, just last year, redescribed the holotype of Mamenchisaurus cyanocanadorum, presented a new phylogeny, and then gave new size estimates. They also amended the original diagnosis to include orthopomorphies such as an elongate external mandibular fenestra and a distinctive pneumatic ventral trough through the cervical centra. And this is relevant, as we'll see in a bit. The very crazy long neck is a signature of Mamenchisaurus. Now, since long necks are so much a part of Mamenchisaurus, let's consider neck length. And of all the species, Mamenchisaurus cyanocanadorum has been claimed to be the largest and hence presumably with the longest neck. Unfortunately, like so many of these titans, it's frustratingly fragmentary. By scaling with Mamenchisaurus hertuanensis, an earlier estimate by Russell and Tseng came up with 26.2 meters or 86 feet. and using the same method, Moore et al. Corrected this to a more modest 21.6 meters or 70.9 feet length for Sinocanodorum, with neck length of 10.9 meters or 35.8 feet. The Moore et al. Paper nominates Xinjiang titan as the sister taxon of Mamenchisaurus Sinocanodorum. Xinjiang titan has an estimated neck length of at least 13.4 meters or 44 feet. Scaling from this, they arrive at a neck estimate of 14.4 meters or 47.2 feet. That's impressive, but not all. Using Mamenchisaurus youngi, which has an almost complete neck of 18 cervical vertebrae, they arrive at a neck estimate for Sinocanodorum of 15.1 meters, that's 49.5 feet. Now, I don't usually like to scale models based on just one part, such as the skull, but in this case, the neck is so central to Mamenchisaurus' identity that just for fun, let's just do that. I estimate the true central length for the neck of our star today to be 32 centimeters or 12.6 inches long. So, scaling from Mamenchisaurus hertfannensis, our Haolonggood is 1 to 34. Scaling from Xinjiang titan, it's 1 to 45, and extrapolating based on Mamenchisaurus youngi, it's 1 to 47. So how was this length possible? Now, given the neck length to body ratio, you'd imagine it'd be too front heavy for balance. Now, I'll link to a few papers below later on for more detail, but for now, let me share a couple of ideas you might find interesting. Now, first, remember that pneumatic ventral trough? Well, in addition to this, there were many other pneumatic features, and Moore et al. Found that in Mamenchisaurus Sinocanodorum, the necks were almost 69 to 77% air by volume, making them incredibly light for their size. Now, this degree of pneumaticity is comparable to that in the larger sauropods such as Sauroposeidon. And second, these very long cervical ribs are really fascinating structures. Histological studies by Klein et al. 2012 show that these are actually ossified tendons, meaning tendons that have calcified and hardened. So you have very long, thin tendons attaching the cervicals to the neck muscles. And here you can see that if the cervical ribs were short, the ventral muscles would have to attach quite close to the centra, bulking up the neck considerably. And here you see that with a longer cervical rib, the ventral muscle mass could be displaced backwards. Less muscle in front makes the neck lighter, because muscle bulk is essentially replaced by long, thin tendons. To visualize this, you need look no further than your forearm. Now the fingers here are controlled by muscles located quite far up and are connected by these very long, thin tendons. And that's why for many people, the wrist and the distal forearm can be slim and light. But unfortunately, it also means if you're interested in aesthetics, it's hard to build a lot of forearm size. When I did bodybuilding years ago, I got this part larger, certainly, but then it would taper quickly into this spindly stretch. Bodybuilders with longer muscle bellies can have much more impressive forearm girth throughout. The importance of these adaptations can be appreciated by looking at this original PNSO Mamenchisaurus in the old traditional posture. And because this is a uniform material throughout, these proportions make it very front-heavy. Being inanimate and inorganic, without active muscle, fascia, and other biotensegrity factors, you need a base to physically anchor it from face planting. And thirdly, these stiff ribs were arranged in overlapping bundles, which added stability by reducing flexibility, particularly in the lateral side-to-side and against torsion or twisting. Mineralization of these tendons reduces their deformation, strain, and damage while helping to support loads. Now for general range of motion. Christian et al. 2016 estimated that a habitual neck posture was an inclination of 30 to 40 degrees at rest and about 20 degrees during locomotion. Our Haolonggood today certainly seems to be in some motion, and it's 35 degrees inclination. But bear in mind the updated posture, which I've discussed in my PNSO Mamenchisaurus review, and compared to the Christian illustration with the more traditional horizontal position. And accounting for this works out to also a 20 degrees orientation, agreeing nicely with the Christian paper. Now, I'm not sure if all this was intentional, but it's just one of those nice little touches we mightn't even think of, which makes me happy. Now, a final point. I believe in my Adema Argentinosaurus review, I mentioned the Paul 2019 paper. In there, he suggested that Mamenchisaurus Sinocanadorum could be as long as 35 meters, 114.8 feet, based on a pair of cervicals that might belong to it. However, with their new amended diagnosis, Moore et al. Found no anatomical overlap with their diagnostic criteria. So, while impressive, it may not be Mamenchisaurus Sinocanadorum at all. Alright, plenty to say, and you can see why this is definitely a 2, maybe even 3-part video. But now I'll just tell those of you who can only get one that if you ordered the plain brown, you'll have 0 regrets. I still believe that PNSO has some of the subtlest paint applications in general, but this Mamenchisaurus stands up in all areas very well, even against the museum line models, and not just matches, but even surpasses some of them. Now, I'll see you soon for part 2.